All right, welcome back. We are WEBD6201 in the winter 2020 semester, and it's week 11, part 1, and we're going to talk about Node and Express more. Kind of an ongoing thing that we've been talking about the last time we were together. Again, one thing I just did was update the class on our course schedule. I'm going to publish the changes up on DC Connect for those people who are part of the class. What I've done now is I've copied lesson 9 from GitHub and I made it lesson 10. I'm going to drag this thing into VS Code. Let's drag it in here like we'd normally do, and I'm just going to reset everything just like we normally do as well. So a couple things that we have to talk about. We've been using something called Express Generator. All right, the Express Generator created this scaffold. It created a public folder, and it created the routes folder as well as a views folder. Again, in later versions of this project, we're probably going to go with a server folder as well as a client folder. I'm going to go with client server as opposed to public views and routes. But for now, we'll keep it simple so you can rebuild this if you follow the videos, and we'll move on from here. So a couple things to note is that package.json would say lesson 9. I'm just going to go and change this to lesson 10 to make a difference. There is no README file right now, and we do have a GitHub connection. So if I go to git remote, you can see that there's a remote called origin. We're going to remove it. Git remote remove origin. Okay, are you guys able to see my screen or not? Maybe not? No. Okay, good. So let me just go back. I mean, on YouTube it's working, but not here. And this is where we talked about it, right? I said, hey, it's going to work, but then I'm going to forget because I'm kind of doing things multiple ways. So let's resume screen share. There we go. That should allow you to see in real time what I'm doing at the same time as I'm recording. And yeah, good. So again, I did a git remote origin. That's what it is, and I'm removing the origin remote. And what I want to do now is I want to make a new GitHub repo. So let's go back on GitHub. So we're going to go to github.com /Durham Programmer. Thank you for that, guys, for letting me know. And I'm going to make a new repository. Let me sign in. There we go. Sure. And I want to make a new repository here. So we're going to call it WEBD6201, and just like you would notice, winter 2020 lesson 10. Okay, so that's where we're going to store everything. We're going to grab these last 2 lines of code right here and go back to our VS Code and right click and then press enter, and that should populate everything with all the stuff we had before. But however, we have some changes, and remember that some of the changes that we have, there's 1,000 some odd changes to this one. And one thing we're missing from this code is a .gitignore file. I'm not sure if you noticed that, but a .gitignore file would definitely be things that we want to not put up on the web. For now, there's not much I want to ignore, and that's why I haven't done that. But you notice there's all these changes, and these are all the packages that we added in for Font Awesome and so on, right? So let me just add those in. So I'm going to say added Font Awesome and Bootstrap. That's what we did from last time. Right, so we'll put this up on the staging area, and then we'll click on, once this stages everything. There's a lot of stuff to be staged. It's just like literally adding everything to the staging area right now just by clicking that button. There we go, so it's all staged, and now I'm going to click this commit button, which is basically doing a git commit Okay, and then I'm going to push this up to GitHub. So that should be the latest version of the code now. You should have it up on GitHub so you can look and see that you and I have the same things. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So now we're doing things at the same time. All right, so let's check and see what this looks like. Just like we always do, we kind of view what this thing looks like. So I'm going to press again, Control backtick, and clear the screen here, and we'll just do. Remember, we can't do a light server anymore. We need to use NodeMon, which is the little helper tool that we downloaded through Node. And what NodeMon does is it starts a server. One thing you're going to notice is that there is no automatic refresh on the page anymore. What we need to do is manual refresh. So again, if I go up on localhost, let's do that. First of all, let's see what this is. Our GitHub link right here. Here's our GitHub with a couple commits. And if I go here to localhost, here's localhost, then we should be able to run this. Did we move this to something else? What did we change? I think we had a conflict with the server last time. Hold on a second. And I think I ran the server on 8080. Let's make it 3000. Again, notice where I looked. I looked inside of the server.js file. Server.js file is your actual backend server. That's the node piece that we're retaining. So this is port 3000 here. Okay, so save. It's going to restart node on the new port. And now if I refresh, we should have Express. Okay, there we go. So this is what we were left with. Notice that we don't have everything that we had before. What I did was I installed everything that we had before, just from that top level layout, right? So let me go back to what I'm talking about here to show you. So if you look at our views page, right now all we have is an index.ejs. We talked about EJS last time, and EJS, what it is a template engine, right? A template engine. So what you're actually seeing here, I'm hearing some noise. So you guys have any question to ask? Whoever's unmuted right now, can I ask you to mute yourself, or if you have a question, please ask it so we can move on. No problem. Okay, so yeah, so again, what we're looking at here is Node.js, and this is EJS. EJS is the template engine, and the template engine is, we're using this template, and the template looks very similar to an HTML page, but it's not an HTML page. And what I mean is, even though there's markup on this page, what's going to happen is this markup is going to be injected. It's going to be injected and created, basically put together into a page, right? Which is what will be happening. Okay, so that's what's going to be happening on the when this thing kind of comes together. Okay, so you can see that what we've done is we have the bottom part of our script just like we normally would, and we use node modules just like we normally would. Everything is the same from a client perspective. The difference is these little less than, %sign equal, and %sign greater than. Whenever we see this, I want you to think about this as little curly braces for us. And in your mind, when you're looking at a language, it's almost like I'm putting these curly braces in here, and anything that's inside the middle of the curly braces, I'm injecting as data. Okay, the equal sign is actually relevant, by the way. Okay, which is basically saying take the value of whatever in title and then inject it into this spot right here. Okay, that's what we're going to be doing right now, and I'll be looking at EJS with you as we go forward. Okay, so notice it's being injected here inside the head of the document, and also here inside of an H1 tag, and that's the title, right? And the title, where are we getting this from? If you remember, if I go back to our code, we have a route called index.js. Here's this route, and there's only one route in here. It's a router.get. You're going to see two types of routes, a .get and a .post. All right. So the post, what normally we do is whenever we have some kind of form data or something like that, the post will actually process the form data. The form data will be sent to the server on the back end, right? So that's where it's going to be coming from. Okay, and so here what we have is we have a little object. There's a little object right here. Again, you can look on your code as well. And this little object is what we're injecting. The object has one property, title, and the property's value is express, which is just a string. So this is a string value. Notice if I hover over, it'll still give me that data. So the string, we get express, and we're going to inject this string express anywhere we put title. So going back to our EJS, if I look at our index.ejs, right, you can see that anytime I use title, right, as an example, then what I get is I get express being injected in here. Okay, so to prove this, right, if I change this express to something else, like WEBD6201 as an example, and I can put other things in here like welcome to WEBD6201. If I did this and I press save, right, and then if I go back to our page here and if I refresh, I have to refresh because there's no automatic refresh anymore, you'll see that it's going to inject that data back into the page. That's what's going to happen. And notice it says welcome to WEBD6201. Why? Because this is being used twice, right? And let's see where that's being used. So you can see that it's the title is here as well as the title is here. All right. So if we took this paragraph tag away and saved it and then go back here and refreshed it, you can see that now that's gone. Okay. So that's what's happening. That's when we see this, that's how it's put together. So again, in your mind, don't think about this as a web page. Think about this as data. I've got a bunch of data and I want to display this data. Remember this whole request response cycle, right? This full loop, if you will, or it's going to turn around. I'm going to send a request out to the server, right? It's going to go out there. The server is going to take that request, process it, and then send it on back, right? And that, kind of full loop, it's going to kind of, the full journey that it's taking, right? Out to the server and back, right? That's what's happening here. And so what's happening is the user's making a request for a page. The server is processing the request, slapping together the data that it needs, and then creates the page based on the data that I've put together. Okay, that's what's actually happening. So I really don't have HTML pages, not really anymore at this stage. This will be created, it will be made into an HTML page when the user gets a response. Are we good with that? Okay. Okay, so that's the first part. Next, let's talk about some of the structure again, just as a reminder. So remember that server.js, we listen for stuff on port 3000. We also inject the header to this, which is whenever we use the require keyword, what's going to happen is we inject a file or a library exactly where we use the require keyword. So on line 7, I want you to think about this as jamming up all kinds of data and just injecting all my code right in here on line 7. It literally includes it right here on this line. And what does it include? Well, if we look at require ./app, that means, remember, whenever we use require, we don't need a JS. It looks at app.js, which is right here on the same level, and it injects everything that's inside this file inside server.js at line 7. That's what happens. Okay, so in app.js we have our basic requires, create error, express. This is the actual middleware that we talked about before, this part, the express middleware. And then we have our path, which is part of Node.js, right? So path is just another module. It's a built-in module, whereas express is something of a third-party module. We've had to download express. And you can tell the difference between modules when you look at your package.json file. Package.json, you notice that there is no path in here as a dependency, right? But you do see express as a dependency. And that's a good hint for you to understand that express is a module, a third-party module, and path is a built-in module. All right, so those are the two types of modules we're seeing here. There's also other ones. There's cookie parser and logger. They do other functionalities. And then we have two controllers. One is, and this is kind of like root controllers more than anything else. I'm just going to make them like this. They're kind of smashed together. So we have a root controller. I'm going to call them what they are. That's inside of ./roots. That means inside the roots folder. /index. Notice there's no JS because we omit the JS part so that it looks in here in this file, and that file literally gets injected on line 8. That's what happens. So on line 8 you can see that the contents of this file get injected. Now if we have a require that we've used from before as an example, the only thing that gets injected, notice that this part here is being used. However, we have this idea of a module exports. Okay, let's remember how this works. Going back to app.js, right? App.js, I require. This is like an import. And then in the views, sorry, in the roots index.js, we have an exports. So require, exports. Require is an import, exports is the export. Now notice what I'm exporting. I'm exporting this thing called router, all right? Router, if you notice, right, is this router object right here. So first we create a new router object. And this is why we need to inject or require locally. And this little variable, express, that's sitting inside of routes index, it's different than the express that's sitting in that inside of our app.js. See, we've already done it here. Here's where we've done it, right? We've done it here. But we're using this library express to create app, this, right? And we're doing the same thing inside of our route index. We're making express, and instead of creating an app, we're not making an app, we're making a router. That's a different thing, but we're still using the express module, okay? This router, this variable, if I hover over it now, is of type router, and what we're doing with it is we're exporting it, all right? So we're saying, hey, this module is going to export the router. So we're actually exposing it outside of this module to the one that's calling it. Okay, so that means that when I go back to app.js, when I require it, it gets injected here, but it doesn't know. So app.js has no idea what went on inside of the private area of our index.js. And what I mean by the private area is this part up here. This part up here is the private area. Why? Because this, my friends, is not being exported out of this module. Why? Because the only thing that's getting exported is router. For example, if I make another variable, right? Let's say my variable. Okay, I'm just giving you an example here. My variable is equal to, I don't know, WEBD6201, right? And if I save this thing, it's going to reboot the server, as an example, okay? Whenever we do that. Whenever I make a change to any one of these files, NodeMon is smart enough to reboot the server. Notice also there's a change that we've made to app.js. Maybe we've made a space or something. As soon as I save a file, then it reboots the server. The server needs to be rebooted because remember what we talked about before? The server itself creates an object that listens, right? And if I make a change to the server, I'm actually making a change to the whole package. That's what's happening. That whole object that I'm creating, that very complex object, the server needs to be reset. It needs to be rebuilt in order for me to see the changes up online. If I don't see that rebuilding happening, there's no changes. It will be the exact same as we've seen it every single time. Okay, so that's the thing that we need to do, and that's why NodeMon is very helpful. I notice it restarts everything for us in the background, right? So again, going back to this, because we have to talk about this a little bit more, because I know I breezed through it the last time we went here. I made this variable my variable, but notice it's not being used anywhere. Okay. So when I do this, my variable is now considered private. This is it's like a private variable, right? And what I mean by private is that it only lives and dies in the context of this file, index.js. Okay? It doesn't escape out of this file because I haven't included it as an export. Okay? So I want you to think about this for a second as what we do here. So the only thing that I've exported or exposed is router. Now, if I take my variable somehow, right, and I say something like, I'm going to show you something. Let's suppose I have another property that I want to add in to this object here, and I call it my variable. Now this my variable is not this one. This one is a new one. It's a property that I'm putting inside of this object, right? But if I point it to my variable, now you see how it lights up, right? I'm kind of saying that, well, WEBD6201 is a string. It holds a string, and if I hover over it, it tells you that it's holding a string. So I've got my variable and my variable, which is part of the property. And this can be very confusing, but you'll see it a lot, okay? I could always, just to make it different, let's just call this, we'll call it the name string. Okay, normally what you want to do is kind of make it so it really makes sense. So name string, which is a property of this anonymous object right here, right, is holding the value of my variable in here. Now, even though this is a private variable and it's not available outside of this module, one thing that is going to be available to us is my variable inside of this private object that's going to be injected into my EJS file. And to show you this, if I go back to my index.ejs, and if I inject my variable, so if I say something like h2 and then course name, right, as an example, and then I use these curly braces, and remember, a curly brace isn't really a curly brace, it's less than % equals, and then the name of my variable. So I say, you know, what did I call it again? I called it my name string. We'll just take that variable so I don't forget. So name string, right? It doesn't give me any code hinting, by the way. And then, you know, these are the closing braces equivalent. Opening brace, closing brace. That's what it does, right? And then the equal sign basically says take whatever value and inject it. If I was to do this and press save now, right? Course name and an h2. If I go back here and refresh, you can see that I get a bit of an error. Let's see what happens. So it says name string is not found. Okay, name string is not found. Let's see why. Well, why? Because we never saved index.js. Let's save it now. When we save it, the server reboots. And when the server reboots and we refresh, we're not going to get that ugly error anymore. Okay. And by the way, Node.js and Express give you ugly errors unless you make a custom error screen that can come up. Remember, this is like doing your web server from scratch on the back end. Does that make sense? I'm just looking to see if anyone has any questions so far. All right, so I don't see any questions. I'm going to move on. Okay, so knowing this, knowing that anything that I don't export is private, right, as an example, and anything that I do export is public. It's publicly accessible to my whatever it requires it. Going back to app.js, then we know that anything that when I assign router, index router, the reason why it's called index router and not just router is because this is for the main page, index router. It's for the main, your main site, if you will. Okay, that's what this does. And the only thing it looks at is the root. Okay, we're not looking at anything else. So we have to create. Remember that whole thing where we did our page switcher application, that kind of thing, where we switch from one page to the other. Well, here we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to use Node.js to do it for us. Okay. So a couple of things we have to do to make this more usable. We're going to go back to our old stuff that we've been working on from before. So remember a couple of lessons ago, I believe it was lesson 8, way back here, we had a views folder. And in the views folder, we had two things, partials and content. Okay, I want these pieces back, guys. I want partials back. These are partials. And I want content back. I want all this. But I want to copy this, but be also strategic in that these pieces that we're going to drag back in are EJS files, not HTML files. So, but I still want everything. It's going to be identical to what we have already. So again, I'm just going to copy everything that was in content, so all these files, as well as everything that was in partials. This is from that previous lesson, footer, header, and scripts. I want to grab all of these things and then use them in here instead of my index.ejs. Index.ejs is just my template. This is where everything comes together. This is equivalent to what I used to use for my index.html page. Right? That's what it used to be. And that's why I've kind of built you guys up like that with a single page application, which is what we're doing right now. So I want to make those two things. So I need two folders. And what I can do is I can use our operating system to do this. So I can go back out to the desktop. Right? So here's lesson 8. And I'm going to go to lesson 10. And I'm going to go into views, right, as an example. I'm going to grab these two folders, content and partials. I'm going to copy them. Again, this is from lesson 8, and then paste it in. And when I do, I have those two things in there. And again, they're irrelevant right now until we fix them. Okay, so let's fix them, and then I'll push this up on GitHub for you guys so you have it. Okay, so how does this work? So notice I have content and I have partials. Let's fix up the partials first. So again, I'm going to go here to my operating system. This is just a little bit easier, and this is why I'm doing it this way. However, you could do it with VS Code as well. But in my operating system, I could go into views, in my partials, and then let's just change these from HTML just to EJS. Okay, so I'm just going to rename these things to EJS one at a time. So I'm going to go in here, change this to EJS. Okay, and same thing with scripts. There's the 3 of them, and the same thing now goes with content. So I'm just going to go through one at a time and change these to EJS. All we want to do right now is restore what we had before in here, the functionality. No, if I could actually do that properly this time, that would be good. I want to restore the functionality here with using EJS as opposed to HTML. There really isn't a great way of doing this better. I don't trust mass changes, so although even this is challenging, but this at least guarantees that I'm going to go through, and I'm just converting. Think about this as I'm taking an old legacy site and I'm converting it into a modern back end and with a modern front end. Okay, that's what I'm doing. So I'm migrating, if you will, from HTML, CSS, and JavaScript to Node.js with Express. Okay, there you go. So all those now are EJS pages. And all I've done is just rename them to EJS. So if I go back to VS Code, you can see now that if I go to partials, I have a footer.ejs, a header. They all look the same, but I want you to notice that they are not the same. They are EJS pages. They're not HTML pages. Okay. So this is great. I've renamed them. I've added content and partials. I'm not integrating them yet, but I've added them in. It's a great place to put all this up on GitHub for you. So I'm going to say added content pages to site, or we'll say to web app, because that's what really it is. And I'm going to just stage all this. Right, there it is, and then I'm going to push this up to GitHub. So you guys should have all of this now on week 10. Any issues with this part? So again, we're converting right now. All we're doing is we're converting stuff from what we had. We're trying to make it work with a new framework. That's all we're doing. Okay. Great. Okay, so let's take a look at that index.js. So under the EJS file. So index.ejs. Again, this is our template, right? Right now, what we've done is we've physically injected stuff in here, and I don't want to do this, right? This isn't something I enjoy doing at all. Here, what we have is a couple things. We have a navbar, right? This is the navbar, And we have this head and a title and all this kind of stuff. By the way, the head is missing things. It's missing meta tags. It's missing all kinds of things, right? So what I want to do here is I just want to clear all this up, right? One thing we do need is the different piece parts to make all this work properly, right? That's what we do need. And let's look at the Express documentation to help us along. So again, when you look at stuff like this, if I say Express include, right, and I want to include partial, which is what I want to do, it's going to give you some great examples on here on how you do it. This is what it looks like. So again, less than %, and you see that there's a minus, and then include whatever the view is called, and then % greater than sign. Okay, so that's what it does. It includes all that in there inside of Express. Okay, so that's what I want. So going with this then, and we're making our stuff, what does our header look like? Our header is just our navbar, right? That's what it is right now. Okay, so our navbar is this piece, but I really would like this to not be called header, but this is kind of our header. It's not inside of a header at all. So let's modify this so it's inside of a header tag, because now we're going one step further. So we're going to say, hey header, this is where we're going to this is where we're injecting stuff. And by the way, if you get this kind of weirdness, we can always switch back, because right now it's looking at this page as if it's an EJS page. We can, in VS Code, we can specify that we don't want it to see this as an EJS page. We want it to see it as an HTML page. Trust me on this. Now we can get Emmet. So we can say header. We're getting Emmet code again. And what I want is I want to take this header and wrap it around my navbar, like so. Okay? Just like we kind of had before, right? So there's our header, and that's what the header is, all right? Okay? That's what the header is of my page. So let's continue. So that's our main nav. We can look at our footer, and you can see that nav is also, it's a nav, bottom nav, which is what we're using. So we'll make this into a footer. Again, I'm just going to specify for a second that it's not an EJS page because we're not doing anything. I just want to make it an HTML page, and I'm going to call this footer. So footer. Again, we're just going to grab this tag and put it at the bottom, and just kind of tab it over so it looks nice. There we go. Scripts. Okay, scripts is okay. We're basically jQuery and Bootstrap is the only thing we're injecting. That's pretty good. Scripts, header, footer, and then what about the head of our document, right? So that's another thing. The head and the bottom. So that's kind of like the footer could include the bottom part of my document, right? Because take a look at my index.ejs. Index.ejs just literally has this part, right? With my script. This is one thing that's missing. It can probably include this in scripts as well. So this part. So in scripts.ejs, one thing that's missing is my actual custom script. So we can put that in there, right? As well as the bottom part of my stuff, right? Which is the body tag and the HTML tag, right? That's what closes up everything. So I could take this piece here, this piece, and then inject it into the bottom of my my script tag. Okay, so scripts, and go in here and then just say, well, you know what? Scripts also includes the bottom part of my body, if you will. But the reality is that sometimes this will interfere with what we're doing. It's safe right now, but we may not want to do this. We may want to have a separate top and bottom. Okay. So let's do that. So let's make two partials. I'm going to make a new file. We'll call this, again, this is like the head, and this is the, so there's a header and a head. So head.ejs. So there's a head. And what I want to do with the head is basically make a new top part of my code. So again, I'm just making it componentized, if you will, more than anything else. So again, I'm going to switch back to HTML, and I want to use HTML5 as a template. Notice it gives me UTF-8 viewport settings for this thing. It gives me a language and an HTML doc and the head part of my document. I don't care right now about anything other than this part. Okay, this part here. The body tag is important because that is going to be something that I want to include with the head, right? And anything else that I want to include here, as an example, for example, CSS. If you want to really go crazy, you can also, in your head, you can also have another section for CSS.ejs, just like we have scripts. And then in CSS, you'd probably include the bottom of the head and the body. Okay, that's what I probably would do. So just to be, and there's a reason for this. For example, sometimes what we want to do, we want to have different CSS content for different pages if we want to create different templates. It gives us flexibility. For now, though, what we're going to do for us is in the head of our document, we're going to include our common, CSS files that we need. Okay, so that's everything, including Font Awesome and Bootstrap and our custom CSS. And we already have that in our index.ejs. If you go to the top, you can see that we have this stuff. We've already made it. So I'm just going to grab these links here. I'm going to copy them and go to my head and then put them in. Okay, like this. And then here in my document, we are going to keep that the same for now, and we're going to inject something later. Okay, so this is this part. It starts with the body tag. Okay, cool. And then on the bottom of the scripts, like we said, we would put the normally put the closing tags, but I'm going to make a bottom because maybe we might have different scripts. We may want to include things or not include the scripts depending on what we're doing. So again, I'm going to make another new file. We're going to call this the kind of the head. We'll call this the bottom, right? And the bottom of the file is just literally the closing tags, right? So we can go something like this. We can say so /body and then /HTML, because that's all that's there, right? If you notice the index.ejs, literally that's all I'm doing. I'm just closing it up, right? So now there's also other things you can do here. I'm just kind of show you how far we can take this, right? When we create our stuff. So only a couple of tags here, and then you have everything else, right? So we have our footer, we have our head, which is this part. We have our header, which is this part. We have our scripts, which is this part, and then we have our bottom, which is this part. Okay, and I want to combine all this into our own little file. So instead of having all this, let's just get rid of it all now, right? We don't need any of this. And we can inject stuff. We can say, just like we did before, less than % minus, and then include, and we can include something. Now this would be the EJS. Now we have to also think what we're including and how we're including it. We're sitting in index.ejs and we're looking into partials. That's what we're looking into right now. So it's again, and we can try this out, /partials and then / whatever the name is. So we're going to say that this is the head. And just like we saw kind of online here, we include the entire thing, head.ejs. Okay, it's not like the other thing. Okay, so then this is the first include, head.ejs. Okay, and let's keep going, and we're going to find some errors, and we're going to fix these errors. So then the next part is I want to also include. So we're going to look at the next part, which is the header /partials /header.ejs. Okay, that's the next part. And then include /partials. And then we're going to go with our scripts.ejs. It's just the right order, the same order that we would normally expect things to be. And then finally include /partials /footer.ejs, followed by include /partials /bottom.ejs. Now again, I could include in here, this is a template, I could include whatever I want, but more or less the head and the header go together. The scripts and the footer and the bottom, they go together. And then guess what I put in here? The content. So this is the content area, right? So again, that would be something like, here's our content area, right? And this is the bottom part of our page. Bottom components, right? And these are, everything in here are the top components of our page. This might cause an error. Top components. Okay. This might cause an error because we're right at the top when we're injecting. Okay, so top components, content area, bottom components, if I spell bottom properly. All right, and we don't have a content area where we could have to go in there and inject the content depending on what it is. Okay, so cool. So we should have nothing right now. And just to show you that this all works, we're going to inject, we're going to say the content area is going to have an h1 tag. And again, this is looking at it as not an HTML page. And we're going to inject the stuff we had before, which was our data that came from our route. So if you look at index.js, we're looking at title. So we want to inject that inside of our index.ejs. So this is title. Okay, so it injects in there. These things get injected from the partial pages if we have the right pathing information. Now this slash partials might be wrong. It may just be partials. And we'll check that out in a second. Okay, so we'll save this. And then we'll go back out to the page and let's see how many errors we get. All right, so again, if I refresh now, we see, okay, couldn't find /patials. That's nice. If I remember that it all has to make sense. One breaks, the whole thing breaks. All right, and now we can see that we're good to go. So notice that we have our copyright down here. We have our welcome page, but this looks kind of funky, right? Why does it look funky? Because in our original pages, we didn't just include our head and the header inside here. We used a container tag for this kind of stuff as well. Okay, so we used a container tag. Let's make sure that this is saved for a second. So we can check this if we go to our previous version of our page. So if I go to, again, I'm going back to the desktop. You can look at your previous code as well. But on my desktop, I have all the code from before. So let's just go back to that. And then again, week 8 is what I'm looking back to. And if I look at my index.html, I'm going to open this up with code just for a second. So because remember, we're converting. Take a look what we have here. We have a header, right, with an ID of main header. That's something that's missing. We have a main with a class of container. Okay, that's important to note as well. Main with a class of container. Header with a class of main header. Okay, or an ID of main header. So we can put that in there. So let's go back to our index.ejs and put that in there. So again, inside of header.ejs, right? We want to put that in. So we want to say that header with an ID of header because we want to hook into this later on, right? A navbar. This is a navbar, right? That's what's happening here. And by the way, you're going to probably say to yourself, like, how come I'm getting that weird spacing and I haven't got it before? And I'll explain that in a sec. All right, so yeah, this is good. And if I go to, if I keep going, one thing that we're also missing is some of the IDs that we want. So if I go back to that that page, index.html page that we were looking at, let me just open it up here so we can see it. Here's my index.html page. We also have this main with a class of container. I think this is still important, so we'll still grab this. This should actually be in the inside of the template. So we'll grab this and we'll go back to our index.ejs, and inside of this area here, this main area, is where we want our content to be injected. So we want to kind of have it inside here. Now right now we're just using a test, right? This little title. But eventually we want it to be in here, right? And then the same thing goes with our partials and our footer. Our footer, is it configured properly? Now remember that we said footer, but what does our index.html say? Well, it should have an ID of main footer, which we forgot to do. Let's put that in there. Okay, and scripts with an ID of scripts. I mean, again, we could certainly put that in there, but I'm just going to attach the main footer there. So I'm going to go to my footer.ejs and do that, just so that we're the same as what we were before. Okay, there we go. Okay, great. So now let's take a look and see why. Can any one of you guess why this is the way it is? Why is our navbar the way it is? And I'm glad you guys saw the error. One of you, Evan, saw the error. But why is it that we're seeing this problem? Can anyone have an idea of why this is happening? Actually, if you look at the code, it'll tell you why. But let me see if anyone can discern what it is. I'm just going to wait for a minute, and then hopefully you guys can come up with a reason. Maybe put it on chat. Again, it won't be published on YouTube, just on chat, so I'm seeing it over here. What is happening? What's happening is this navbar is wrong, right? Take a look. The navbar, I'm getting all this spacing around here. I never had that space before. Where's that coming from? How come I'm getting this spacing? Why is this happening, right? Why isn't it looking like it used to look like? I mean, I'm injecting the page. What's going on? Well, remember, here's the answer. It's not Bootstrap stuff, but definitely CSS. Heather's got the right of it. It's definitely CSS. And if you look at it, let's take a look at the CSS. So remember, we've inherited some stuff from our scaffold that we got. I'm just going to close all these up for a second. So our scaffold includes, inside of public, we also include this scripts folder with this app.js we tried, as well as a content folder with this app.css, which is this, a padding of 50 pixels, guys. This is it right here, right? This is where it comes from. This is where that stuff, that crazy stuff comes from. So we want to get rid of this. In fact, we want to replace this stuff with the stuff that we had before, which is we're rebuilding things, right? So I'm going to go back into my content area here. I'm going to go to my app.css from the previous, kind of project and open it with code. I want to grab all this because I want to have all this this styling and stuff. So grab all this and I'm just going to paste it back inside of our app.css here. So we're going to have everything that we had before. This is for the contact page or the login page, right? And that's it. Now if I go back to our page and if I refresh, you can see now we're back to what it used to look like more. We're closer. We're not quite there, but we're getting better. Okay. Yeah, so what this allows us to do, it doesn't allow us to surf anywhere. None of this does anything yet, because remember, this is not real. These aren't real links yet. They're going to be. But for now, they're just, kind of links that are at the top of our page that appear inside of our page. We're mashing things together. We're creating the page, kind of together. Okay. Cool. All right. So that's definitely one. And so let's go back down to this. So let's keep looking at that index.ejs page. So again, the container is here, and this is our template. So what I want to do, okay, is in here I want to inject the right content depending on what my page title is, right? I'm going to switch on page title, and depending on what my page title is, I'm going to inject content in this page based on page title, right? Just like we did before, right? So I'm going to change the page title when I click on things, okay? So when I click on stuff, I click on a link. What that's going to do, it's going to make a request, right? The request is going to take me to the route, right, in my index.js, this route here. Right now I only have a /, right? But we can make other types of requests, okay? And let's start by doing this. If I go to /, again, you can see that the title, right, the title is going to be whatever we want it to be. And we have a name string that we were playing around with. So let's get rid of this now. We don't need this anymore. The title for our / is going to be home, right? So that's going to be the home page, if you will, right? That's the title. We don't need this. Okay, cool. And so too would it be. I'm going to make another one. Okay, so that's one. But what about if someone puts in home? So if I go, instead of going to the /, which is the root, if I just go to my site would be localhost as an example. Or if my site was example.com, if I went to www.example.com and put nothing else, that would be the root. That's what this / means. What if I went to, let's say, home? If I went on the home side, I want to render the index index is my index template. That's this index.ejs, right? And my title is still going to be home. Those two are going to be the same, yeah? So whether it's this or whether it's this, it's going to be the same, right? And now we get into this idea of I can have a separate function, right? Let's suppose I make a function here. This is a function just like normal JavaScript. And now you see it's in the global space, but really it's not. It's locked into this module, into this router module, this index.js router module. So if I make a function called display home, just like we've done before, then what I can do is I can render, right? I can pass in some stuff in here. I can pass in request, response, and next. This part right here, right? Request, response, and next. So request, response, and next. I can pass that in. And then what I can do is I can render anything I pass in here. So I can kind of take this part out, this part. I can cut it out of here and put it into there. Let's just try this out. And then you tell me what's actually happening. Okay, there's this render part. Okay. And I'll do the same thing here. Grab this stuff. And instead of duplicating, all I'll do is call display home. So I'll say display home. And I'll pass in request, response, and next, those variables. I'll pass them in. Okay. And you'll see we'll talk about what next is in a bit. Will this work the same? I'm still passing things in. Notice I'm saying, hey, there's my requests. Response is the only one that's being used. Requests and next are being ignored because I'm actually not doing anything with my request object or my next object. So I have one function, display home, that's being used by these two things. In fact, this, my friends, is what we call the controller functions. These are controller functions. So this is my actual route, but this is my controller. This is my logic for what these pages are doing. Okay. So let's see if this works. So going back out, if I refresh, does it crap out? So it says home right now, which makes sense. And if I go to the URL and if I type in home and press enter, it too works, right? Because home and / same. Okay. However, if I type in something else like about, it's going to give me an error. It doesn't know what about is. It has no idea how to deal with about, right? We haven't defined that at all. Okay. In order for us to define that, we need to put that in there. So just starting to get this going. So again, you can see that I'm rendering the index page and I got my title, which is home as an example, right? Here's my title. I'm passing in home to my index.ejs. It's injecting it where it needs to inject it. So first it includes these things, right? It includes my title here. Here's something else. In the head of my document, the head, remember we include it on line 2 and it's inside partials. Here's the head. Can I also include this here? Let's see. So it doesn't have anything, but let's say % equals, we'll call this the title, right? % greater than. Can we do this? Like, is this possible? Because, I mean, head is being injected and doesn't know anything about title. What does this do? Does it cause a problem? So again, going back to this, and if I refresh, yeah, we're good. And we're good, right? This or this, no problem. Okay? So doing it this way, the title, notice that the title now is home on the top right. It says home. And that means that I can do this kind of stuff. Once I've injected it, it does exactly what we think it's going to do. Wherever it gets injected, we can still use this document. This document will receive an object that includes the title. Okay? So this is important. This is kind of an important way of doing things. So again, so far that's all we're doing. And if I go back to our code for a second, and let's go back to our route. Here's our route. Okay. We have a couple of routes. Let's make the rest of them. So this is our home page. We know that there's two routes that's possible. One is the root, right? And the other one is home. Okay, and the other routes, we want to get the about page. Okay, so when we get the about page, then we do the same thing. We're going to do router.get. Okay, I'm just going to type it in. We put in the path of the page relative to the root, so /about. Notice we're not putting about.html or anything like that, right? However, if you really wanted to accept home or about, you can put two different ones in here, and it would accept both and go to the same location. And then some kind of callback, that's what this is, that allows us to do something with it. Now, curious, we have a named callback here, right? And let's make another function, okay? And let's call this function, display about. Here's display about. We'll take in a request, response, and next object, right? Just like we did before. And we'll render in the index template. That's what this means. In the index template, we have a object that we want to render. I'm going to put these together now just so that you can see them succinctly, because this is what it should look like. Okay, we have an object that we're going to render with the title that is about. Okay, so there's our object. So when we go to the display about page, so far all we're doing is we're switching it and it's going to say about. Okay, so here we have about, and can we not just do display about, and then can we pass in that information? Can we say request, response, and next? I mean, is that possible? Is that going to give us an error? Because I know that you guys are thinking it. I'm putting it in because some people are saying, wait a minute. I mean, this is kind of like an anonymous function, right? Can we just do this? Let's see if we can. So again, we're going to go here to the page. We're going to refresh. By the way, things have happened in the background for us, okay? One thing that's happened is this is crashed now, okay? And the way to know this is you can see that it's going to crash. Why has it crashed? Because as it parses through, it looks through and says, hey, what is this display about? You might get this reference error that looks like this sometimes, where it says request is not understood. It's not understandable. What is request? There is no request. Well, of course there's no request, because what's happened before is we did it the right way. Right? If I look up over here, this is actually taking the request, response, and next object. In fact, knowing that the display home is only going to respond, and I don't care about the request object, I can literally not pass it in, because the only thing that this really needs is the request object, or the response object, right? The request, response, and next is the callback that is taking this function. Okay, so again, I can literally just say I only want the response object. That's all I want to pass into my new function. This is my display home. But here it didn't work. It didn't work because I didn't practice the right protocol, right? I didn't use the right stuff. The way it would work is you need some kind of callback. Request, response, and next. Okay? Next, by the way, is optional. And then what we want to do is we want to take this display home and put it inside there. And we're going to pass in only the things that we need, which is just the response object. Okay? Because in this case, all we're doing is responding. Get response. Okay, we're not doing anything with the request yet. The request we'll do something more with when it comes to posting, which we haven't done yet. Okay? So again, I'm just going to move this over so we can see this, right? It could also be seen a lot of times like this. You might see this a lot more on the web. Something like that looks like this, display about. And now we don't need all these. All we need is just one, because it's not required. All we need to do is what we need. We just need to pass in what we want. Okay? There we go. Here's a response object. Here's display about. Here's display home. We want to change the title to about. That's all we're doing right now. And we're specifying the about page. Okay, so let's try this out and refresh. We'll go back. Home works. And if I type in /about and press enter, we see it's about now. Any questions around this? Okay. again, I think fairly understandable in the same vein as we've been working in this entire time. Okay, so that's what we're making roots. We're defining each of the roots of each of the links on our index, our main site. Call it the root level of our site. Okay, that's what it is. Okay, and let's continue. Let's do a couple more. So we'll do and all we're doing here is we're just changing this stuff, right? So get about, get contact. We're going to say that we're going to display contact, right? We're going to do something with contact. So we're just going to copy paste. You can see right now all we're doing is changing one thing. But later on we might have other things we do, right, that we haven't done yet. Contact. Contact. Okay. So we're just changing the route. And let's do the other ones. Products and services. There's two more, right? Products and services. So this is the products page. This is the services page, right? Here's products. And here's services, where we're displaying products here and services here. We've done this before. We've just done it with a switcher, a custom switcher, where here it's being done by routing. We're actually creating our custom router before. Now it's being done through using, we're using Express to do it for us. Okay. Now we're missing a couple things. We're missing, we've got about and contact, but we don't have products and services. Let's put those in. So products and services. So products, services. So display products. Notice it didn't give me an error. I always worry about that kind of stuff. And here's services. What I mean by that is we listed the same thing a bunch of times. It didn't say, hey, you've got a problem. Yeah, Node isn't great on that, to be honest. And we'll talk about some ways of improving this later. Okay, so pretty cool. We got all this. We're looking at this returns void. It does take a response object, and we're actually doing response.render, and this should say products, and this should say services. Okay, pretty cool. Then we've got everything in there. I think we followed in pretty nicely. Yeah. What do you think? Well, yes and no. Okay, yes and no. And the thing is, remember that there is no switch case anymore. This is actually requests that are going out to the server. So the question was, can we put another switch case instead of separate functions? The challenge that we have is that these different cases are happening from the user's request. There is no switching that we're going to do here. This is the switcher, right? Think about these as actual cases. That's what they are, because each of these things is in fact just a different route that we're going to put in the URL. Okay. So we have different functions here that are going to do different things for us. Right now they don't do much. Okay, they just change the title to something else. Okay. In fact, if you think about it, we could have had all this inside of these instead of those. But if we want to reuse them again, or if we want to do something with them, in fact, what I really want to do is hide all this away inside of a controllers folder in the index.js file, right? So this is views, these are routes, and then these controllers should be different. They shouldn't be here inside the routes file at all. Okay, and that's why I've removed them. I put them up there on purpose just to get you going with what it's supposed to look like in here, like this. Okay, that's what it's supposed to look like. All right, so let's see what it does when I save this. So save this, and what I want to do is just to give us some to make an effect happen. I want to go to the header.ejs here, and I want to change some of these links. So instead of the links being the way they are, home, product, services, about, contact, we don't have a login page yet, but I just want to put in /home /products /services /about. We're going to make our little page work for all our pages, right? /contact and then /login, which we don't have yet. Okay, our login page. But we might as well add it since we're here. Why not? So we'll go into our index.js, and the last one we'll do is the login page stuff. So we'll get one more route. We'll say for /login, we'll display login. That's what this does. And that's what it does. It gets the login page. It displays the login page. That's what we're doing. And so this one will be the display area. So display login. Okay. And just to keep it separate, we're going to say that this area here is the routes section. And just to make sure that you understand, this is the controller section. We're not going to have this here later on. Okay. Does that make sense? Yeah? Hoping it does. So let's see if this works. So if I go back and if I refresh now, again, I've saved everything. And if I go to home, it says home. If I go to products, services, about us, contact us, login, right? All that works, right? And all I've done is made a bunch of routes. So these routes that we've specified catch any requests that come through for any of these things, okay? However, if I put anything else in here, if I specify some other route, it's going to be a 404. I don't have a custom 404 page yet, but I will. We're going to specify a custom 404 page. And we're going to do that as part of your assignment. Okay? So that's what's going to happen. So that's what this thing does. So wouldn't it be nice if I had a controllers page, right? And a controllers folder that I had everything inside of. Again, notice I'm not injecting content yet. That's a whole other conversation. All right? We'll do that tomorrow. But I want to talk about routing and controlling and all that kind of stuff. I think that's a more important idea. Once you understand this routing thing, then it'll become clear to you what's happening. Okay, so I have routes and I have views. This is the two folder. I also have a scripts folder and a content and inside my public area. But this is what it really looks like right here. Let's just close all these up so we don't see anything else right now. This all closed. This is our file structure. So what I want to do now is I want to add a new folder called controllers. Let's add a new folder. So I'm clicking down here, make a new folder. We're going to call it controllers. There it is. And the controllers folder, it doesn't matter where it is, way out here. It's in alphabetical anyway. What I want in here is another file, so a new file called index.js, right? And you're like, wait, I have another file with index.js? Well, if you think about what we're doing, it makes sense. So I want the index controller. I want the index route. Index means the main one, the root, if you will, right? Root route, it's kind of weird to say. But index route, or the main route, if you will, is this, the index controller. I want the index template for the views. That's the main template. I might have other ones for other levels or other kind of files, right? That's what I have in here. So index, I use index a lot, but they're all different because they're sitting in different folders, right? Different files, different folders. Even though it's the same name and it might be confusing, think about this backwards. Start with what it says, the index controller, the index route, the user's route. If I had a bunch of users, I would have a user's route, and we're going to take that away eventually. But this index controller is something that I want to have. And what I want is, I want to create all those routes in here, right? And I want to module export something, okay? That's what I want to do. So let's suppose I just wanted to have a name, right? And we can start off with something like this. Let's say we'll make a variable, we'll call it my name. And you can do your name. My name is Tom, okay? And what I want to do with my controller right now is just do something that looks like this. I want to say module.exports, right? And notice I can put whatever I want in here. Module.exports, right? And I could say equals to my name. I could say that, right? So that means that the only thing that I export is my name, okay? Which is just a string called Tom. Okay, let's just try this first. Okay, so just from an understanding perspective. If I go into my routes, and if I go to index.js, and at the top, right, at the top, outside of this router and everything else, if I actually install it, I can say something like this: let controller, right? Now, notice it says routes, controllers, right? Let my controllers equal require, and then /. You know that controllers is on the same level, right? Because I'm literally sitting here and controllers on the same level. They're siblings of each other. So I can literally just go, I mean, if I want to, /controllers /index, right? I could do that, okay? So then what is controllers? What is this thing that comes in? And if you want to, let's do a console log just to see what it is. Console.log of controllers, right? And by the way, just to make it more thing, I'll say my name is, and we should see Tom, right? And let's see if this makes any sense to you. Does it? Let's see. Is it going to give me what I want? What do you think? Or is it going to be an error? What do you think before you do it? Error, or is it going to give me what I want? You're just thinking that. Okay, let's see if it works. Okay. So if I go back and I'm running it, let's go control backtick. And it says, okay, we're way down here now. It says, okay, my app crashed. And it said module not found, right? It says my EJS loader, my controller's index. It says require stack. Here we go. This is where, when we say a require stack, it goes through this order. It goes through my index. So here's the server. Server goes to my app. This is the stack. App goes to roots. Roots goes to controllers. And man, this / stuff, man, it doesn't like it so much. And it looks at index. It's trying to find this module index, and it cannot find the module, right? So this is the important part to this whole thing. Controllers, make sure we spell it properly, index.js, which is supposed to be what it is. And let's go back into that part there and figure it out. So here's controllers. So what if we just took out the / and see what that did? Is that enough? And we can see when we save that we still have the same problem, because again, notice it says controllers index. And to get a hint of how this works, we can look at the app.js. Here's our app.js, and we do this, do /routes/index, right? So we did this from out here from our app.js, okay? And to show you this, if I was to do the same thing, let's say I wanted to inject controllers first, right? So let's say in my app.js I wanted to do that. I want to say let controllers equal to require / controllers, right? / notice I'm getting a code hinting here, and I wasn't getting it before, right? So I'm doing it from this level. I'm okay, right? / controllers, yeah. So what could be the problem? // right. Why? Because, my friends, what's happening is I'm inside of routes, index.js. I'm going up one level to routes, and then going down one level into controllers. So really what it looks like is this, / controllers index. And that would be the proper route for this. Why? Because I'm going up one from index. I'm going up to this level, right? And then that's what these dots mean. And then down into controllers index. and this is where it would be. Okay, let's see how that works now. Control backtick. Do I get what I'm expecting to get? My name is Tom. Yeah, that's how it is. So it did do this. It did exactly what we thought it was going to do. It injected the string. That's what we did. We injected the string inside of this controller's object. Notice it actually picked it up too. It says, hey, you know what? Controller is actually a string. Well, if we can do that, then maybe we can do something else. If I go in here and if I say module exports, right? And that equals to my name, right? Could I not attach multiple objects to the export object? Example, what if, instead of my name being like this, what if I said module exports dot, and I call this something else, name, right? Equals to my name. What if I did this? Okay. So my name is an actual object. It holds a string, Tom. I'm making something new. I'm attaching it just like I did. And notice it says property, right? And I'm attaching something called my name. Okay, if I did this, I can't access it the same way as I did before. If I go back to my index.js here, right, in my routes, I can't do this anymore, right? I'd have to do controllers.name. That makes sense, right? Controllers is an object. It's going to hold name, and you can see name is a string. If I save it, and I can control backtick, you can see now we're still good, right? We're still looking, it's okay. So if I can do this, if I can do .name, well then guys, we're pretty much solved, right? I can attach whatever I want to the module. So going back to this, as long as I use the pattern module.exports dot and whatever I want, right? Then I'm golden, right? I'm golden. So what does this mean? That means that I can go into my routes and grab all this code that I have, all this stuff, right? And cut it out. Okay, here's the major change, and I'm going to stop here. Okay, so I'm going to cut all this out. All this, right? And I'm going to put it inside of my router. Here we go, inside here. And bear with me while we get rid of all this junk, right? And I have all these functions, right? Function display home, function blah, 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 whatever, right? At the end, there's two ways I can do this. I could say module.exports is equal to display home is equal to display home. Module is equal to this, right? Or could I not just do this? Module.exports display home is equal to a fat arrow function that returns all this. Okay, so let's try this a little bit differently. So module.exports dot, and then we'll just put that in the front. Bear with me while I replace those things, and I'll go and fix it in a second. Notice it's doing my work for me, guys. Do you see this? What's happening here? It's kind of doing what I want to do, but with a little bit less finesse than I was hoping. Let's try that again. I just want this part. Some copy paste errors. Paste. Yeah. I just want to return this, and I don't want to return the function because it can do funny things here. Okay, so I'm just adding in these functions. I'm adding in all these functions in here, but instead of making it a object, I'm going to make it so that this takes an anonymous. That's why I told you before, that other way of doing things. Let's just copy this whole part. Right? Okay. So I want you to tell me now when we've done this. Okay, these are the changes we've made. Right? Display project, display services, display login, did all this stuff, right? Yeah. And how do I access this stuff now from my index.js? Well, we have console log controller. No longer is this just a regular controller. It is an object, right? That's what it is, okay? And so instead of playing display home, we can just literally just go controllers dot display home. You can see that it even comes up. Controllers dot display about, display contacts, display products, display services, display login. Are we good? What do you think? You think this is going to work? And let's see if it does. So again, we're going to sit back out to here and we're going to refresh. We'll see an error if it didn't, right? And we can see that it's routing just perfectly, right? And to know this, you can see that here you're getting all you can see there's no issues here, right? Anymore. So questions around this pattern that we've created. So we've got this, we're starting to do the model view controller pattern. We're splitting up things into what we call, separate concerns. All right, we're separating concerns this way. Here's our app.js as an example. So now what's happening is we go here, we go to the router. The router's module here in my index.js includes controllers. The controllers module in here, what it does is it defines several functions. And each function is attached to the exports object, right? Because each property, display home, display about, display contact, is a reference actually to an anonymous function, right? That's what this is. It's an anonymous function that has, that does something. This is actually behavior. So it says, hey, render this page, whatever the page is, with this object title home and so on. Okay, and that's what this thing does right now. Okay, and that's all that it does. Are you with me? Like public functions. No, it's not quite like public functions. What this is like, think about the module itself as a container. All right, so I've got my module. Every node file, if you think about it, is its own container, right? And then the container is completely, non-exposed. You can't see anything inside that box. It's like a black box, right? But anytime I attach something to the exports object, think about the exports object as a package or a bag of stuff, right? That I want to put things in, right? And that bag of stuff, the loot bag or the bag of holding from a D&D perspective, I just drop stuff into that bag. Anything that I drop into that bag, that is going to be the thing that I expose or I export out of that module, right? Anything that's not in that bag, that's not part of the exports, stays in that module and is private. So I could have private functions in here that are not exposed. But anything that I attach the exports keyword to, module exports, and I do this, I expose anything that I create. And I can create any pattern that I want here. So when I import it, when I require it, I make a reference to the entire exports object and I leave it inside of controllers. So controllers now becomes the namespace. It's almost like a module or namespace again. And so I can use controllers as an accessor for different functions that I define or different variables. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so that should make more sense to you. Okay, so this is where we want to stop today. And we'll talk about it more. I'm going to put this up on GitHub. So I'm going to say, again, why is it giving me this weird thing? Cancel. Oh yes, these are all the changes. I'm going to get all these changes, and I'm just doing it manually because I don't like that weirdness right there. I'm going to go to git commit -m, and we'll say added controllers. Git push origin master, which should push off the master branch. I'm not sure why this is like this, by the way. That's the first time I've seen that. Controller providers, source control providers. That's fine. All right, so that's what it just did everything that normal. So, so before we end off, because I know we're at the end, and I don't want to run too much overtime with you guys again today because you have other things to do. Any questions around the stuff we talked about? So really quickly, the things we discussed while I stopped screen sharing. So are a couple things. The first thing is let's just view the presentation. First thing that we're doing when we talk about stuff is we talked about this idea that we're moving assignments. The lab 3 will be our last lab that we're doing. We're going to move into an assignment that's going to encapsulate the rest of the stuff that we're doing, as well as a final test. The assignment is going to be kind of put together everything we're going to do with Node and Express, and that's going to be either 1 or 2 people. I'm going to post a little announcement about that at the end. And then on top of that, we're going to have a final test that's going to be more of an inclusive test that includes a little bit of Ajax potentially. I'm going to try not to, and maybe just Node. So things around Node and maybe Ajax, things that we want to ask you. And it's not going to be a practical test. Chances are it's going to be true, false, multiple choice because of the time frame that we have. Okay, you'll get a couple of attempts to do this, and it'll be the last week of class. And keep in mind that we also have Easter Monday we're going to lose, which is the 13th of April. We're not going to have that day, and that's the next day. April 14th is going to be the final test. Questions for you guys before we go. Will collaboration be allowed on the final assignments? Yes, I will allow collaboration. Like I said, 1 or 2 people if you want to do that. Are you talking about more than 2 people? No, it'll be just 1 or 2 of you get together, make your final, or if you want to do it alone, it's up to you. Any other questions? Guys, thank you so much. I really appreciate you guys coming out. I know this can be stressful for some, but I appreciate your perseverance. The fact that you're here is awesome. I'm going to see you all tomorrow again, and we'll do the next part of this, which is now that we've got our controllers, how do I inject my content into my pages properly? And we're almost where we were when we were pre-Node. Okay? Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to sign out now. Actually, I'll stick around if there's anyone who has any questions that want to ask me questions. The rest of you, I'll see tomorrow. Thank you so much. I'm just going to stop recording now.